You're now listening to Dirty Feet,
a brand new podcast on No More Radio.
Bonjour, oui, vous êtes sur les ondes des pieds sales, aka
Dirty Feet podcast on No More Radio. I'm Allison Burns.
I'm JD Papillon.
Oh, I'm Jen Doan.
The
Donor. I'm the donor.
This is Joanie on No More Radio.
Stay tuned for
dance,
circus,
burlesque,
tango,
movements,
salsa, whatever it is, we're going to move you. What are we now? Podcast hosts?
We are a podcast, yeah. We're
Podcasters.
Podcasters. I like that. Podcaster.
Cool.
For dance. How about that?
Oh, yeah. Do you wanna dance?
Welcome to the second Dirty Feet podcast. Again, it's going to be a bit of a bilingual back and forth, English and French show. And we're going to be talking about Short&Sweet, the 9th edition. I'm Allison Burns, one of your hosts, along with
JD Papillon
and
Joanie.
We're going to do the sweet and long version of talking about Short&Sweet.
For our listeners who might not be aware of, is this production by Want and Needs Dance, which is composed of Sasha Kleinplatz and Andrew Tay. And it's an event which started out basically as a way to sort of bring people from the dance community together. It was an event that they were like, you know, we should do something that just is not weighted down by the studio space, the normal representation space of most dance pieces. So they're holding it at La Sala Rosa, and for the past few years they've also been holding one during the FTA, the Festival Transamérique, in the Quartier des Spectacles. And Short&Sweet basically is a way for them to bring people from the dance community, turn it into a big party, and have people present very short works, so 3 minutes long at most. And after 3 minutes, they turn down the lights, they cut off the music, and you need to wrap it up, you know, once the 3 minutes is up. It's a really interesting format. There is a really lively atmosphere when you go to watch it. And it's also fun because you get to see some faces from choreographers that you're not used to seeing. You know, there's a few people I've seen there, and I would never expected to see what they produced from their work. So sometimes it's really interesting because people are more willing to take risks in a format like that than they would if it was a show presented by a presenter in a very formal space. So it's a lot of fun, and for people who haven't been, the 9th edition is this Wednesday, November 28th. Doors open at 8:30. The show starts at 9. It gets packed really quickly. Mm-hmm. So for listeners who would be interested in going, get there early because they pack up La Sala Rosa really quickly.
They really succeeded in creating that community. Like when you go, you see everybody in the contemporary dance kind of sphere, and it is a really different atmosphere. There are drinks for sale, and you're mingling. You're sitting at tables instead of in a traditional theater. It's very nice.
Yeah, and when we say people from all over the dance community, it's presenters, it's journalists, it's choreographers, it's dancers. And, you know, there's just this whole camaraderie sense to it that is really interesting to see because sometimes you don't get to see that as much in some shows because the delimitation between the audience and the artists is much more present, I feel. It's a really fun show. For people who haven't been, go. You should definitely go see it this week. And we're really excited today because we have 3 guests who are presenting work at Short&Sweet for the first time. So our 3 guests today are Gerard Reyes, who is also a dancer for Marie Chouinard.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Good, I'm really good.
We also have Laurence Fournier Campeau, who just performed in Raphaël Perrault's piece Roleplay at Tangente.
Allô.
Salut, ça vient?
Oui, merci.
And we have Kimberley de Jong, who is a dancer for Fred Gravel. She is a rehearsal director for Marie Chouinard, seems to be really busy and will be also presenting for the first time. Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
Good. So we'll just start talking a bit more about yourselves. So Gerard, tell us a bit more about your dance career, where you come from, what you've been up to.
Sure. I started dancing at the late age of 20. The funny story is that I was really cocky at the age of 20, and I thought that I knew that I was destined to be a dancer. So I auditioned for a couple of schools in Toronto. I auditioned for Ryerson and I auditioned for York University. And this is like without ever having taken a ballet class or jazz class or a modern class. And so so my audition for Ryerson was like, we started with a ballet class, and the teacher said, okay, everybody to the bar. And I just looked around, and I like took my cues off from the other people, the other auditioners, and I see that they moved towards the bar, and so I moved towards the bar, and then everybody has their left hand on the bar, which is the way that usually a ballet class would start, and I have my right hand on the bar. And so it's like typical what you would see in like a Hollywood movie of like a real débutant, you know. And then I realized, oh, I'm the only one who's not doing this certain way. And anyways, I do not know how, like the rest of the audition is kind of a blur. I don't know how I made it through the ballet component and then the jazz component and then the modern component. But nonetheless, I was there until the end. And then we had individual interviews with the artistic director, and she asked me, so why are you here? And I said, well, I'm going to be a dancer. And she said, okay, well, if you don't get in this year, and I thought, in my head, I thought, if I don't get in this year, what are you kidding me? Like, it's obvious that I need to be here. You need me in this program. And she said, but she continued, she said, if you don't get in this year, then I highly recommend that you take some dance classes and come back next year and re-audition, and we'll look at you then. And so I didn't get in. But I did take her advice, and the next year I re-auditioned, and I got into the school. And that was the beginning.
Can I ask what you were doing up until 20? Were you on a different path?
Oh, definitely. I was like on the other side of the tracks. I wanted to be a professional lawyer, and
no, there's not really a semi-professional.
No, there's not
lawyer.
a semi-professional. It's a semi-professional dancer, I guess. But yeah, I wanted to be a professional, a lawyer. And then at some point in high school, I became very depressed, and I realized that wasn't what was going to make me happy, and that I needed that there was something else that was more fulfilling, and something that wasn't so heady, wasn't so intellectual, but that was calling me. And so I answered.
And after Ryerson, did you come to Montreal right away? What did you then spit in Toronto?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, before I left Ryerson, this was the irony of the whole thing, is because I was even though I was the least experienced person in my Ryerson class, I was one of the first people to get a professional gig, which I got actually before I left Ryerson. And they made an exception for me because usually the faculty doesn't like their students to be training outside of Ryerson or be getting any like professional gigs outside of Ryerson. But I got a gig with, it was the first year that the Canadian Children's Dance Theatre, something like that, in Toronto.
The one that's close to TDT?
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Yeah.
Canadian Children's Dance Theatre, I think is what it's called. And it was their first year of starting up almost like a cousin company, which was pre-professional. And so I got a job with them in January, and I graduated in April. And then after that, I got a job with Danny Grossman for a year, and I danced with them for a season, and then moved to New York because I realized the scene in Toronto was not going to fulfill me. And then I worked for 2 years in New York with Bill T. Jones and Shen Wei, and then some other contemporary dance choreographers, Noémie Lafrance, who's also from Quebec but works down there. And then got the job with Marie Chouinard here in Montreal.
From the Montreal scene, have you experienced anything other than Marie Chouinard? Have you been dancing for other people too?
No, actually. So it's kind of ironic because the reason I left Toronto is because I felt it was very insular, and then yet I moved to Montreal with a job, so that was different. So I moved to Montreal for the job with Marie Chouinard, and then I left Montreal and I went to LA for a year, and then I moved back also because of Marie Chouinard. But this is actually going to be, Wednesday will be my first performance in Montreal with no affiliation to Marie Chouinard.
And you're also choreographing, so that's probably a new step also for you, I would guess.
I'd say professionally speaking, yes, because I have choreographed things in the past, but it's been quite a few years since I last choreographed something. So coming back to choreography, it has been with a different approach, and I think I've seeing it more as a career and as like a professional step, whereas before I was kind of dabbling in it, and it came to me more than I was like seeking it out. I choreographed a little bit at Ryerson, and then choreographed a little bit after Ryerson, but this will also be the first time my work is presented, I think, in like a more even though it's like an informal context, it's like a more formal context than the past
It's in front of the community and everything.
Yeah. I'm super excited about it too.
How about you, Kimberley? Like, can you tell us a bit more about your experiences, training, everything?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I started dancing in BC at a school in Vancouver called Arts Umbrella. And it was an art school, had all kinds of arts, but they had like a youth dance company there. So I grew up learning there. I moved to Montreal at the age of 13, and I was dancing for the École supérieure de danse du Québec, it was called at the time. I was living with a boarding family, really friendly family I'm still friends with today. So I was there for a couple of years, but I went back to Vancouver to graduate and sort of have a more, I guess, relaxed dance upbringing, which wasn't just strictly ballet. And then when I graduated there, I started working for the Cirque du Soleil for a few months, and I was part of the Zumanity creation, but I was kind of young to do that show. It's kind of a sex show, and I was 19 at the time, so I wasn't really even legal age. But they took me for another show in Vegas. I was doing a replacement role, so it's kind of perfect because I was just there for a couple of months, and so I got to test the waters of doing the same show twice a day and living in Vegas, and I'm kind of glad that it was sort of like a temporary job, because then I moved back to Montreal with a bit more money in my pockets, and went to Europe and did like my own audition kind of tour with just like backpacking around Europe, and I got a job in Holland in Galili Dance, it's called. It's a small town in Groningen up north. Unfortunately, the company doesn't exist anymore, but yeah, at the time it was an awesome opportunity for me to be dancing in Europe, and my first kind of real professional dance company, I guess. And then I did some auditions while I was there when my time was I felt like coming to an end there. And I went to Paris and did an audition for Marie Chouinard in Paris, and she accepted me. And it was funny because I'd done an audition for Marie when I was 17, and she said, "Well, come back when you have more experience," and so I did, and so she took me. I think I was maybe 23 when I got the job with Chouinard, and so moved back to Montreal. Somehow I always keep on coming back to Montreal. And so danced with her since 2006, and had a baby in 2009. And I toured with my baby for a couple of years. Gaia, her name is. Yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of tricky, especially with Fournier, just because they tour a lot. And so bringing her on tour after the age of 2, where I have to pay for her flights, it kind of didn't really make sense. I was probably paying more than I was making, so I took a break from that, and I've been rehearsal directing for the company since, and working on my own choreography, and then also recently worked for Fred Gravel, did the show at part of Le Danse Danse at 5e Salle, like a couple weeks ago.
How long after you had Gaia did you start dancing again?
I took my time. I actually didn't think I would dance again because I was really luxuriating in the maternity leave that, we feel like it's never long enough, but I guess compared to other countries, we're pretty lucky. I had a full year being paid, obviously not the same rates, but I had pretty good maternity leave, and when they asked me if I wanted to re-sign my contract, I really had to think about it. I wasn't ready to jump on the bandwagon so quickly. I didn't really take many classes. I really took my time as a mom that year. And it's funny because when I went back to the company, I decided I did want to keep on going with the dance career, is that I didn't feel like I lost anything, even if I hadn't danced for a year. It was kind of like just in my experience of of being a mom, I came back and I felt like I had maybe more to give as a dancer.
That's so inspiring. It can be done, everyone.
Yeah, we don't hear it that often. That's why I guess the question had to be asked. We don't hear many dancers taking off for
Yeah, well, I have a
traveling.
couple, close friends that are moms, and I'll name one in particular because I was just working with her. Is Jamie Wright, and she has two, and she's pretty awesome because she's teaching at La Nuit, performing, and doing her Perf Max in the morning, which is like total hardcore training. And she's just got two at home, so there you go.
And you're also presenting something soon, a choreography of yours at Danse Buissonnière, right?
Yeah, Danse Buissonnière for emerging choreographers, and I'll be presenting a 10-minute piece there with Nathan Yaffe, who I'm also dancing with in that piece, so choreographing and dancing. We'll be at Monument National from the 13th to the 16th of December.
And Laurence, how about you? Do you want to talk to us a bit about your experiences, your training, where you come from?
Alors, moi, j'ai grandi à Montréal et j'ai étudié à Montréal aussi, à l'UQAM. J'ai gradué en 2009, donc je suis toute jeune dans ce milieu. Et depuis ce temps-là, j'ai dansé un peu partout, si on veut, avec des chorégraphes de la relève, des amis à moi, tout ça. Et là, donc tu l'as nommé tantôt, j'arrive d'une semaine de performance avec Raphaël Perrault dans une pièce qui s'appelle Roleplay, donc entre autres. Sinon, comme chorégraphe, j'ai un projet qui s'appelle Ballet de Ruelle, un projet de danse in situ, donc c'est un déambulatoire. On amène le public à se déplacer avec nous, donc c'est plein de petites capsules. À la base, c'était dans une ruelle, mais là maintenant on le fait dans plein de lieux publics, des parcs, des squares, des rues, etc. Donc, on amène le public à se déplacer avec nous et voir toutes ces petites capsules-là. Donc, ça fait 2-3 ans qu'on travaille là-dessus. Ça fait 3 pièces qu'on fait avec ça. Donc, j'ai commencé à chorégraphier à travers ça. Mais c'est toujours des collaborations, évidemment. Mais je fais la direction artistique avec Gabriel Surprenant-Lacasse aussi. Donc, ça, c'est un projet qui m'occupe beaucoup. Donc, je travaille beaucoup à l'extérieur. Donc, pour moi, la scène, j'en fais. Donc, j'en ai fait cette semaine, la semaine qui vient de passer en fait, mais je travaille beaucoup plus à l'extérieur, dans des lieux publics, entre autres à travers un autre projet qui s'appelle Écoute pour voir, qui est un projet de Emmanuel Joute, donc qui est un projet, un lecteur MP3 et 2 écouteurs, donc un solo, un danseur pour un spectateur. Donc ça aussi, c'est pas mal dans l'espace urbain, ça peut être à l'intérieur ou à l'extérieur, mais voilà. Donc danser sur scène, pour moi, ça arrive, mais moins souvent. Donc, disons que je danse beaucoup à l'extérieur. Sinon, voilà, dans le cadre de Short&Sweet, je vais chorégraphier en collaboration avec Emmanuel qui m'a invité à partager ce petit moment de scène.
Ballet de Ruelle, c'est intéressant comme projet.
Oui.
Vous avez énormément de danseuses qui
Oui.
en font partie. Hein?
Oui, là, on réduit de plus en plus parce que ça devient difficile et à gérer et à financer. Mais on a commencé, on a fait des projets jusqu'à 18-20 danseuses. Donc, c'est super intéressant parce que ça donne vraiment un effet de masse. Les gens sont toujours contents de voir autant de gens bouger dans l'espace. Mais donc, pour nous, à l'interne, ça devenait énormément de logistique.
C'est pas juste des filles qui ont gradué de l'UQAM non plus. Hein? Il y a beaucoup de collaboratrices là-dedans qui sont de diverses écoles.
Qui viennent de différents milieux. On a essayé de regrouper ça un peu, de mélanger un peu les différentes cohortes puis les différentes écoles parce que c'est quelque chose qu'on remarquait énormément. C'est aussi normal parce que on étudie avec ces gens-là, on les connaît bien et tout. Mais on essayait de mélanger les cartes un peu puis ça a créé des belles relations puis des belles rencontres. Mais là, donc, on a diminué un peu notre nombre de collaboratrices. Aussi pour arriver avec une ligne directrice qui est un peu plus claire dans nos projets. C'était très, très, très éclectique au départ. Plein de capsules, mais très, très, très disparates. Et là, on a essayé d'aller vers quelque chose qui avait vraiment plus une ligne directrice. Donc, on a réduit notre nombre de collaboratrices un petit peu.
Pourquoi la danse in situ?
Très honnêtement, au départ, parce que un manque de financement. Parce que c'est une façon simple de s'autoproduire et parce que ce projet-là est arrivé un peu par hasard puis finalement ça a explosé en fait, ça s'est mis à rouler super bien, il y a eu un bel intérêt, on a reçu des sous, donc forcément c'est arrivé comme ça en fait, mais c'est aussi parce que c'était plus facile que de faire des spectacles en salle puis qu'on avait des gens qui nous diffusaient puis qui étaient intéressés par le projet. Donc puis on a développé un peu une une expertise là-dedans, si on veut, au fil du temps, parce que c'est quand même assez particulier, autant au niveau de la surface, puis bon, mais d'avoir des gens qui nous regardent en tout temps, même la répétition devient une performance. De devoir gérer avec les gens. C'est un peu de la médiation culturelle aussi, parce que les gens qui nous regardent ne connaissent pas nécessairement la danse, donc d'interagir avec eux, etc., etc. Donc, c'est vraiment un autre aspect de la danse. Je trouve super intéressant. Mais à la base, en fait, c'était pas une nécessité de dire, moi, je veux danser à l'extérieur. C'est un peu apparu comme ça, puis on en a fait une spécialité, si on veut.
Could you tell us a bit about what it means for you to perform at Short&Sweet? It's basically your first steps in the dance community away from Marichinard. So there must be like this like really exciting feeling, I guess, for you here.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is happening now, but I feel like this has been in gestation for the last 2 years probably. I was telling Laurence before this interview started, there's been like a hiatus in my choreography and in that process. But I had like I feel like an energy, like that I wasn't sure exactly how to channel it or where to channel it, and so there was like this like bubbling something under the surface for quite a while, and I think it played itself out in terms of like frustration, but then when I've had a lot of conversations with my boyfriend about this, and he really has helped me. He's been a very motivating force in getting me to the point where I did go into the studio. And actually, when we met, I was in the studio for the first time. This was a year ago, where I had 3 weeks off from my job, and then I decided that I was going to with Andrew, I used Andrew's space for 3 weeks, rented it out, and I just went in, and I didn't really know what was going to come of it. I just knew that I had to get into the studio and see what was going to come. And nothing much actually came out of those 3 weeks in terms of like something to show. And I had spoken with Andrew at that point, and he said, if you're interested in showing something in January, maybe you could show at Short&Sweet. And I was interested, but kind of nervous about the whole thing too. And I think it's taken me this whole year actually of going in and out of the studio and like clarifying my ideas away from the studio too, because I feel like a lot of my ideas come when I'm not in the studio, because the studio time can feel very pressured, and like how do I make the most of this? And at the beginning, I would even like go into the studio and like have my lunch at the beginning of my studio time, or like take a nap or whatever, and my boyfriend thought that was really hilarious, like a very unproductive way of using my rehearsal time. But in reality, I think that was just me getting in touch with like my base self. This has been a long process, and it started before I even went into the studio, and it continues when I'm not in the studio. And I think that over this past year, I've really started to understand for myself why I'm doing this, what it brings me, and how to do it for myself. Because the whole choreographic process actually is a very elusive process. It's so individual. And yes, you can take choreographic workshops, and yes, you can learn about like the dramaturgy of shows and of pieces, but really the way that you get in touch with your choreographic voice, I think, is so personal and needs to be explored as a process, and then the material that you're working with and developing.
And what do you think of the Short&Sweet rules? 3 minutes, take risks is one of the big rules also. Do you feel that it's been a constraint on you and your creative process? Do you feel that it's actually pushed you in a new, interesting direction?
For sure, because actually the piece that I created for Short&Sweet is an in situ piece, and I was working on something in a similar vein, but not that piece. So I was creating something for a theater, and the props, the staging that I was imagining, the lighting that I was imagining would not work at Short&Sweet, not at La Sala Rosa. It just wouldn't be seen aesthetically. The aesthetic that I want from that piece couldn't be reproduced in that space. So I had to think of a way to bring like some of the essence of what I was working on, which is very much what I'm interested in right now, and how to bring that into the space and how to work with those time constraints and how to make something interesting for myself to create in that space. And I really used that space, even though I haven't practiced in that space, but with that space in mind. So I'm actually very eager to get in there on Wednesday and to try it out in that space. I've like made a few trips in the last couple of weeks to the space and looked at it and, you know, thought, oh, okay, this is how far I need to go here, and, you know, just like wrapped my head around actually bringing what I'm creating in the studio to Sala Rosa.
Since it's in situ, you mentioned like your choreographic process was first an in situ piece. Will you be performing on main stage, or are you deciding to perform somewhere else in the space?
You'll have to wait and see. No. Yes, I will be performing. I did not want it to be traditional, and actually, I think that the piece that I was creating already before Short and Sweet came around, I think of it as non-traditional. Actually, what interests me is to not classify my dance as contemporary dance, because I have more than contemporary dance as a background, and my dancing actually came out of like a non-formal desire to become formal and to become professional. But so I started with hip hop, and I think there's influences of fashion and contemporary dance. And
will we see jazz hands?
You may.
Nice.
I would never classify them as jazz hands, but you might.
Also, I mean, you mentioned quickly the sound, the lighting.
Yeah.
And this is something that's completely stripped down, or almost, for Short and Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel that it's something that just allows you to focus on the essential?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I really... the music has been a little bit difficult because I'm working with pre-recorded music. And it's a song by Janet Jackson. And she's also a huge influence. She's been a huge influence for me. Getting the music to fit the time constraints and how to work with that was tricky, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be cut off or that type of thing. So I think now I've got it. I think
we'll have to wait and see on Wednesday to know a bit more about what you're showing. Thank you, Gerard.
Thank you,
Kimberley. So basically, Short and Sweet. What does it mean to you? Like, how did this come about?
Well, Sasha invited me to this year's Short and Sweet, and you know, I've gone to see Short and Sweet before, and what I like about it is just this informal setting of it. You know, like you'd mentioned, Allison, like, you know, you can get a beer, people are standing, sitting, you know, laughing. It'd be a great opportunity to just like try something out, you know, take a little bit of that risk that you're talking about. And how I chose to do that was, I tap danced when I was young, and I left it behind. You know, it's in the closet and hadn't brought it out until earlier on this year. Paige, Collier, and we were rehearsing a solo, a Marie Chenard solo, Étude numéro 1, that Lucy Mongren performs. And so we were just learning it as understudies, and we'd have this sort of warm-up, her and I, and we started jamming in the warm-up. And just this warm-up was so fun because we were really like making music and feeding off each other through our bodies. And after having this like break from tap dancing and also coming back to it, how it's really changed. Like the way I tap dance is so different from when I was like learning steps when I was a little girl, and just like now how I'm a contemporary dancer doing tap dance. And I really feel like it's, you know, more of sort of a jazz improv, and not the jazz hand type of jazz, but the sort of going in listening to jazz, where sometimes you hear some sounds and you're not sure if you're following yet, and neither are we, but you know, we sort of make sense of it as we're going along.
Do you feel that sometimes in contemporary dance we have a tendency to try to move so far away from those more traditional forms of dance, such as tap dance, so much so that we don't even dare bring them into a more contemporary format?
Well, I kind of think that contemporary art, you know, it's so wide, and that there is now room to bring those forms back and alter them and use their form, but then, you know, break them down and deconstruct them. You know, like when I learned tap, it was like steps, like shuffle off to buffalo and, you know, wings. And so rather than doing steps like that, I mean, they're my vocabulary. They're there at the back of my head, but then take them out and I combine them with all of the improvisation skills that, you know, I learned as a contemporary dancer as well. There's lots of room for that, you know, and Gerard was talking about using Janet Jackson, you know, music and his piece, and that's really pop. And I think there's room for that as well as tap dance, as well as, you know, classical dance within the contemporary scheme.
You were also talking, JD, about it being a place for risk and a place where people can experiment. If this goes really well on Wednesday, is this something that you want to pursue?
Do you mean like this piece in particular?
Like this concept, yeah.
This approach.
Well, I was actually in rehearsal with Paige this morning being like, you know, it'd be fun if we did more with this piece because we're really like having fun with it together, and I definitely think that we could evolve it into something greater than it is, because it's only 3 minutes, and you know there's only so much she can really do in 3 minutes, and that's a huge challenge I find in itself, that format, the 3 minutes, because it's like to develop something in that amount of time is it's a challenge in itself. Yeah,
it has that duality of putting a lot of pressure on and taking some pressure off.
Yeah,
because
it is
just
leave it to
3
improv,
minutes.
you know. I mean, that was my question. How do you deal with the time constraint?
yeah.
Do you drive yourself crazy? You know, it's just 3 minutes, and you work on it for 6 months. You know, or do you leave it last minute thing?
Yeah, well, originally when we started rehearsing this piece, I had in mind that we would set things so that we wouldn't get frustrated, and we'd always go for the same thing. And then that just really didn't work because having said it, then it was like if we didn't get it, we'd feel upset because I don't know, because it's only 3 minutes. And then so we started playing more with that improvisation, and then also just in the back of our head, like, oh, this is like an informal setting, it's fun, and you know, so what if we miss it this time? You know, it's just like the energy, the type of energy that we put into it and the approach that will come across.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're sticking to a sort of loosely structured improv, I guess you could say.
Okay. What about you, Laurence? With your choreographing with Emmanuel, yeah?
Yeah.
How did you guys work on it?
Mais en fait, on a plus notre collaboration s'est faite plus au niveau des idées. Donc, Emmanuel avait été invité à participer à Short&Sweet cette année, et il a décidé de le partager, en fait, de partager ce moment-là avec quelqu'un. Donc, Emmanuel et moi, on collabore sur d'autres projets, puis on avait envie de faire un genre de brainstorm là-dessus. Donc, on s'est installés ensemble, puis c'est vraiment plus au niveau des idées. Il m'a lancé des idées, puis là, moi, je relançais là-dessus, etc., etc. Puis on a finalement élagué tout ça, puis on est arrivé avec une idée qu'on a développée. Puis ensuite, c'est moi qui partais en studio pour développer cette idée-là. Nous, on était plus dans le dernière minute de la chose.
Okay.
C'est quand tu demandais
depuis quand vous avez commencé, en fait?
C'est ça, donc ça fait vraiment pas longtemps. On s'est décidé très récemment, mais c'est super parce que moi, j'aime ce côté un peu... Ça sera pas de l'improvisation, mais c'est pas quelque chose qui
quelque chose de vulnérable.
C'est quelque chose, oui, puis c'est vraiment ça, ça permet d'essayer des trucs. Puis moi, ce format-là de 3 minutes, justement, je trouve que c'est fantastique parce que t'as pas le choix d'être vraiment concis, t'as pas le choix d'être clair dans ton idée, puis d'aller au bout de quelque chose. Tu peux pas étirer, c'est vraiment c'est l'essence de quelque chose que tu présentes là, puis je trouve que c'est très je sais pas, c'est comme fondamental, tu sais, tu présentes vraiment toutes les propositions que j'ai vues, c'est vraiment des idées qui sont claires mais qui sont super
investies,
ouais, je sais pas, c'est... Donc, moi, toutes les fois où je suis allée voir Short&Sweet, je suis ressortie là inspirée parce qu'il y a tellement d'énergie là-dedans, il y a tellement de je trouve ça puissant de voir tout cet investissement qui a été mis là, puis c'est juste des bonnes idées, des belles idées, quelque chose de super énergisant. Donc, moi, je trouve ça stimulant à voir comme...
C'est combien d'artistes environ, donc, qui présentent?
Il y a 25 chorégraphes. Ça va être 20 pièces, je crois, parce qu'il y a plusieurs collaborations, mais en tout, je pense que c'est 20 pièces qui vont être présentées.
20 fois 3 minutes, OK.
Ouais.
Donc, ça donne quelque chose qui est super éclectique, mais en même temps qui est très, très stimulant à regarder et à performer aussi, parce qu'on sent comme... prend part à comme quelque chose de commun. Je trouve que ça regroupe bien le milieu, ça ramène ensemble le milieu de la danse. Puis c'est rare, tu sais, des événements comme ça. Puis moi, je trouve ça très très stimulant. C'est un peu comme un party de Noël en fait, du milieu de la danse, qui est quand même quelque chose de le fun là aussi.
C'est intéressant parce que aussi il y a beaucoup de gens qui iraient pas voir de spectacle de danse normalement, qui vont à Short&Sweet.
Tout à fait.
Ça c'était un des paris que Sacha et Andrew s'étaient donné, je crois au départ, de vraiment essayer de rendre ça accessible. C'est quelque chose que Fred Gravel aussi fait beaucoup, de se dire, la danse, ça peut être le fun même si tu n'as jamais pris de cours de danse, même si tu comprends pas le vocabulaire ou le langage de la danse. Short&Sweet, ça donne ça. Il y a plein de propositions qui viennent d'artistes du cirque, la danse. Comme tu as dit, ça embarque le monde énormément, peu importe le background duquel ils viennent. Puis c'est assez intéressant, je pense, pour ça. Kimberley, for you, do you feel that tap dancing, there's something very visceral to it that is going to resonate with the audience?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, what's interesting about tap is that you really can't hide the sounds you make. Every sound you make, it's defined, and you can't hide behind those sounds. And so there's inevitably, moments where you're searching also at the same time, because, like speaking, you say it and it's said. And whereas I guess just or dance without tap, or let's say modern dance, you cannot lie either. The body doesn't lie, but it's somehow more abstract than making music, kind of.
And in a way, I feel that it's kind of similar to what Laurence was saying about how I almost feel like it's an authenticity in the proposals. I mean, in your case, you decided to approach tap. This is a really clear intention that you set on yourself. As you were saying, Laurence, there's no space for lost ideas or anything like that. Like, les choses peuvent pas s'éparpiller.
Exactement.
Dans votre cas, c'est quoi le concept de base, tu dirais, que vous avez choisi d'explorer? Si vous pouvez en parler.
Ouais, ben c'est ça, je m'avancerai pas trop. Mais c'était de quelque chose de très mystérieux. Le danseur qui est mystérieux, le danseur qui a le visage caché, en fait. Fait qu'est-ce qui sort du corps? C'est quoi l'essence du corps une fois qu'on voit pas le visage, les yeux du danseur? Ça, c'était l'idée de base. On était allé dans des idées d'accessoires grandiose, là, mais finalement, on a ramené ça à quelque chose d'un peu plus low profile, mais l'idée, c'est vraiment d'avoir le visage qui est pas montré, donc de pas voir la personnalité par les yeux, puis comment donc ça peut sortir par le corps. Puis c'est ça, c'est juste une esthétique un peu mystérieuse, un peu dark.
D'après les projets sur lesquels tu collabores avec Emmanuel, il semble y avoir une grosse importance sur les sens, j'ai l'impression. Est-ce que toi, dans ton travail, tu sens que ça commence à t'influencer un peu de plus en plus, cette approche-là? Ben,
c'est sûr que Emmanuel est beaucoup là-dedans. Emmanuel, lui, c'est beaucoup son approche de la danse puis du mouvement. Fait que c'est sûr qu'à force de collaborer avec lui, ben, ça vient me teinter, tout comme toutes les collaborations dans la vie viennent à nous apporter quelque chose puis à nous construire en tant que personne. Fait que c'est sûr que moi, j'ai été amenée à découvrir ça beaucoup plus puis à intégrer ça comme partie vraiment dans mon travail, ouais, définitivement.
Pour quelque chose comme Ballet de Ruelle, est-ce que tu penses que qu'il y a cette opportunité-là de se concentrer sur les sens, même si c'est in situ, même si c'est beaucoup de danseuses en même temps?
Oui, c'est différent parce que capter l'attention d'un spectateur dans un lieu public, ça peut devenir très, très difficile parce qu'il se passe beaucoup de choses. Il y a des bruits, il y a des voitures, il y a des camions, il y a d'autres gens qui marchent, il y a plein de choses qui se passent. Donc, capter l'attention d'un spectateur puis lui faire découvrir des subtilités, ça peut devenir très difficile. Donc, c'est sûr qu'on peut pas travailler de la même façon parce que dans une salle de spectacle, on peut facilement focusser l'attention très, très clairement sur une partie du corps, sur un élément. Donc, c'est sûr qu'on faut le faire différemment, mais je trouve que c'est la beauté de la chose. Comment on peut amener un spectateur dans un lieu public à vivre un moment de sensibilité, puis de vivre de percevoir des sensations. Ça devient encore plus prenant quand on vit ça, je sais pas, au parc Émilie-Gamelin, par exemple, ou dans n'importe quel lieu où on n'est pas habitué de voir de l'art, tu sais, où on est juste habitué de marcher, de se promener, de passer là parce qu'on attend le bus. Donc, je pense que oui, ça se fait. Il faut juste travailler différemment, puis il faut travailler différemment à capter l'attention du spectateur, parce que forcément, il est pas là pour la même raison. que quand on va voir un spectacle, on achète notre billet puis on s'assoit dans la salle.
Je lance une question ouverte, so an open question to everyone. What do you expect from the audience at Short&Sweet? Because it is a different audience from what you've probably had in prior shows. Like, do you feel that it will be a really welcoming audience? Do you feel that it will be a hard-won kind of audience?
Depends what part of the evening you come and see a piece. I mean, after a couple of beers, maybe that'll influence the way they see things.
So you'd rather not pass first?
It's fine. But because everything is 3 minutes, I think that there's a certain légèreté to the whole evening, you know.
If it's boring, at least it will be done soon.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
Then again, that's not much of a consolation, but... No one likes
on
my
a
piece,
vraiment
but
tous les genres a Short&Sweet. You know, you have the really kind of funny pieces, and you have the more like, you know, slow. You feel like one piece is like so long, actually, just the way that you move within that 3 minutes, and then something can go by really, really quickly. So your perception of time is kind of warped also, because you see so many different kinds of propositions.
And the structure of the evening is really important because there is this tendency to go towards humor in the short piece format, and then when you hit after 3 funny pieces, you hit that kind of solemn or serious work, and then it stands out so much more. That must be really difficult to program the evening, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't think they haven't seen any of the works yet, so they won't know in advance how to program or what the order.
So it's just by chance whether or not you're programmed, you know, sandwiched between 2 works that are very different than yours, or
Oh, excitement.
For me, this opportunity is a fun opportunity, and I hope to bring that type of fun to La Sala Rosa on Wednesday night also. And I think people generally respond very well to fun, so I'm hoping that the response is a good one.
And to Janet Jackson.
Janet
You
Jackson,
should
all
react
right,
pretty well to that too.
Exactly. She's
Oui,
a
moi
winner.
aussi, il y a vraiment cette optique de plaisir pour l'avoir vécu en tant que spectatrice. Quelquefois, on est très ouvert quand on est là, on est ouvert à recevoir tout. Puis comme on le disait tout à l'heure, autant quelque chose de drôle que quelque chose de vraiment plus formel ou plus intense ou tout ça. Donc, en tant que chorégraphe, non, je suis super confiante parce que je pense que c'est le moment de proposer quelque chose, d'essayer des trucs. Puis pour l'avoir dansé aussi, déjà, non, la réception, elle est bonne. Puis d'ailleurs, moi, j'avais dansé une des pièces qui débutait le spectacle.
d'accord.
Donc c'est vrai que, oui, bon, il y a peut-être c'est un peu plus froid, là, c'est sûr. Mais donc, une des pièces que je dansais était au tout début. Donc c'est de casser la glace, mais les gens sont réceptifs quand même. Mais effectivement, plus la soirée avance, plus les gens ont du plaisir, puis ils se laissent aller un peu plus.
I find the idea of fun really interesting too, that you guys bring up, because I remember Thea Patterson presenting a piece, I think it was last fall. It was basically her in front of Mike, and she started her piece or performance by saying, I thought this was supposed to be fun. And I think that there is so much pressure in that format, which does bring about the fun aspect of it. I mean, like, yeah, it's a big party and everything, but there is a lot of stress in that format because it is rigid, even though it's so open-ended to what you guys can present. It is a very rigid format, and it's in front of a lot of your peers.
Mm-hmm.
So do you feel that stress is warranted, or do you feel that, no, it's just going to be great, it's going to be fun, no pressure?
I think it depends on how you approach it. Of course, yeah, the time constraint or the fact that you have 3 minutes to impress can be an expectation, like can create an expectation and create stress. But I don't think that's stressful. I think that only heightens the urgency to get a point across or to get your message across, and that I think is exciting. I don't see that as stress.
Yeah, just to add is that, you know, we're performing artists and we have all kinds of stress, even if it's not a 3-minute show, you know, if it's a full-length evening or if it's a 30-minute piece, and we're performing or choreographing, and I think so you'll always have a pressure as an artist to, what is this person saying, or what is this choreography trying to portray? So you know, you get that that stress, and like Gerard said, it's your approach, and it's what you put on yourself, you know. What do you want to please people, or is it for your own process, you know? Yeah, you get used to like the stress sometimes.
Ouais, je suis d'accord avec toi, parce qu'en fait, tu sais, quand je parle de fun puis de plaisir et tout ça, ça veut pas dire que artistiquement il y a pas nécessairement de contenu, mais je pense qu'il faut juste le voir de cette façon-là, parce que sinon on s'en sort pas. Effectivement, il y a tellement de types de stress, il y a tellement de raisons de se mettre une pression sur les épaules que finalement, ben, on aurait plus de plaisir à le faire. Fait que je pense qu'il faut juste se dire, ben, go, puis on le laissait, tu sais. Puis en même temps, Short&Sweet, je pense que c'est vraiment une opportunité pour ça. Puis il y a plein de gens qui sont passés par là aussi. Il y a beaucoup, beaucoup de gens du milieu qui sont passés par là. Fait que je pense qu'il y a comme quelque chose de l'ordre de l'échange là-dedans, qui nous amène à juste nous ouvrir. Fait que c'est pas de le voir comme quelque chose de se dire, ben, c'est le milieu au complet qui est là, puis qui va voir et tout ça. Mais je pense que c'est juste comme comment donner à son milieu, puis comment le milieu peut nous redonner en même temps, tu sais. De voir où est-ce qu'on est ensemble, puis où est-ce qu'on s'en va, tu sais. Fait que c'est pour ça la notion de plaisir. Moi, je pense que c'est super important de garder ça en tête.
So you've all gone to see Short&Sweet before, right?
Yeah.
I would like to ask you if you had to pick one piece that really left an indelible that just left an impression on you, a really powerful impression. What would you say?
Gosh, I forget the name of the choreographer, but I can totally describe you the piece and the artist and the dancer. It was Melina Stenson, yeah. So she was dancing, and you don't have a lot of technical like things to work with, and our tech run is like 15 minutes, I think. But the way the lighting was shining on her in this particular year, it was a very slow moving piece. And when I was saying like you have the impression that something's longer than 3 minutes, I really felt like I could delve into this. And it's just the way the light was hitting her face. It was like a simple kind of trick, but it really had me. And her interpretation, I think the light was shining on her face, and just the way that she was interpreting.
She was standing on a table, yes.
That
was her own work.
That was her own work.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
I think
bravo,
she collaborated with a musician on the piece, but yeah.
Well, bravo, Melina, yeah. There's something in justesse dans ce qu'elle faisait that was really captivating, and it was super, super simple. And I don't think it was so funny. It was just more like an image that I could have kept on watching.
For me, it was Andrew's piece when he performed at the FTA
the last
past year.
Yeah.
That just goes to show you how much costume plays a big part in dance, or in like any stage work, or anything. There's a real very strong visual element, and I think sometimes we forget that. We think it all has to do with how we move our bodies, but costume is huge, and it was. That's why I remember that.
Human connection in that piece too. You're talking about the one where he looked like a
shaggy bear,
Cousin It from
yes.
the Addams
exactly.
Family, but like a rainbow version of that.
Yeah,
that was a really powerful work.
C'est bon.
That would be mine too. Actually, I would have said.
Non, c'est vrai, j'avais oublié ça, mais en fait, oui, moi aussi, je pense que ce serait une de mes fortes, mais je dirais. Bon, c'est une amie à moi là, mais Raphaël Perrault, l'année dernière, je pense, elle avait fait quelque chose avec un ami musicien. Et puis, ça m'avait beaucoup, pas impressionné, mais c'est un travail, ça faisait longtemps qu'elle parlait de travailler là-dessus. Puis, vraiment, là, des années, on a jasé de ça. Puis, elle avait juste utilisé ce moment-là pour tester ce travail-là. Puis encore, maintenant, elle n'a pas eu l'opportunité de continuer à travailler plus loin, mais elle savait que c'est vraiment, c'est une thématique qu'elle veut travailler, l'espèce de relation, puis les genres de faire du air drum ou des trucs comme ça. Puis, juste comme de toucher à des trucs... qu'est-ce qu'elle veut travailler plus tard. Puis moi, j'avais trouvé ça super beau parce que c'est comme la bougie d'allumage de quelque chose. Là, c'est différent parce que moi, je l'avais vécu à l'interne, puis bon, on en avait discuté avant. Mais tu sais, de sentir que c'est vraiment le point de départ de quelque chose qui va peut-être dans quelques années aller super loin. Peut-être que ça va être le sujet de sa prochaine pièce ou quelque chose. Mais tu sais, de sentir qu'il y a quelque chose qui est là puis qui va débouler là par rapport à ça.
We're running out of time, but this was a really interesting conversation, and I'm really excited to see all of your work this Wednesday.
Thank you. It's been great.
Yeah.
Oui,
Me too. I'm excited.
Merci.
Dirty Feet is recorded every week at the Montreal Improv Theatre. Check them out at montrealimprov.com.
Dirty Feet is produced and hosted by
Alison Burns,
JD Papillon,
Jen Doan,
Joanie Farran.
and distributed by No More Radio.
You can find more about our show at nomoreradio.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Dirty Dirty Feet, and you can find us on Facebook at Dirty Feet Podcast.
Tune in next week for a whole new show.